So, good evening and welcome everyone to the November Lunar Musings. It's really great to see you all gathering around tonight. I am really interested actually in what wants to come through us all tonight because the astrology is just so wild and packed, and um, I'm not sure about all of you, but it's been really curious for me since we met last, to really feel the different place that some of this astrology is hitting me. It's been a really interesting inquiry for me. So I'm excited that we get to come together again and, beat the sound of our tribal drum and, really explore some of how this is actually showing up in our lives. So let me grab this here. All right, so I'm just going to start with the lunar cycle, and then we'll tap into some of the other pieces that are happening. Great to see you, Sarah. Welcome in, Sheridan. So on November 15th, late in the night or early in the morning, depending on how you look at it, we'll enter the next moon phase that's all showing up in this frequency 24 that we kind of broke into last month when we talked about the lunar cycle. And this will be a cycle that that I'm seeing, carrying quite a lot of this sort of frequency 24 energy, because we also have the conjunction of Pluto and Jupiter, and we have Pallas, Athena, that's also in that same frequency, only in Capricorn. And the pieces that were really standing out to me as I looked at the new moon degree in 24 Scorpio is the strong need that we have to feel ourselves capable of working through many different realms and worlds with a certain level of mastery or a certain level of equanimity, which to me is a very distinct piece of, especially in spiritual circles, that I think gets highlighted that doesn't necessarily get highlighted when we're looking at mastery in this world in a particular way. And so I was really struck by that piece, of just how, especially with this regenerative scorpionic energy that we're entering with the lunar cycle, that it's really opening up this opportunity for us to maybe, even this time of year, when we're pulling back some from all of the pushing out energy that we might have been doing earlier on in the year, but to actually see and take that inventory of how is it feeling to be us in different spaces and in different relationships and within different parts of ourselves and in relationship to our lives from different places inside of us. So there's a real complexity here that I'm seeing in terms of self-understanding, and the desire to feel free and wild in the miraculousness of life, and how much experience we're actually given to hone in on things that are occurring on multiple levels. And so, it's one of the reasons why this also struck me is in this last lunar cycle where I was gearing up, as y'all know. I was like, oh man, we're heading into this frequency 24. I wish I had something more positive to say. And it looks like we're going to be in it for the next 6 months. And then what I found and what I'm finding is that there really are different levels of experience. And this particular cycle, especially that's coming up, I think is really going to be happening on a pretty deep level. And so it may be distinct from the kind of pressurized intensity that we feel from our external environments, like the pulling on us energy, and more of that that sense of, I know there's places that I've been working and I know they're important to me, and damn, are they hard to access sometime, especially when things are stable and especially when things are going relatively well, and I don't have those existential crises that are requiring me to up level myself in ways that stable, comfortable phases of our life don't offer us. Which is why I've always been so inspired by the artists, and the creative folks that can find ways to keep rediscovering those aspects of self through their experiences, that I think when we're sometimes not pushed to do it, it's really easy not to. So let me just take a pause there. I just saw that Carolyn joined us. Let me pull her in. And just see if there are any comments or questions about this upcoming Scorpio new moon, or at least this little bit of it that we've delved into. All right. Oh yeah, go ahead, Lily.
Yeah, it does feel like there's so much going on below the surface. I mean, there's a lot going on the surface
Yeah.
too. You know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
there's just been a lot this year going on the surface, just constantly. And yet there's this undercurrent that's like this swell that I can feel that's moving us into a collective, collectively into a direction that's asking us to awaken to to our true selves, to our true nature, to the true earth, and to the ways that we can truly shine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's deep and it's not always accessible. Like you say, we have to, find space, take space, and get quiet and listen for that and invite it.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I mean, it really, it is, it is really amazing at how much is happening on so many different levels too, and how it just reminds me of that phrase, where our attention goes, energy flows. And what I've noticed in these last few days, which has been sort of I'm definitely, I'm dealing with a lot of collective energies right now in my own astrology personally. And so it's been really interesting to feel, just to be feeling the need to have more tools and how to navigate the personal collective spaces. But what I noticed that was so strong for me is just how much I came down. Like, it was like everything was coming down so strong, and the sort of future pull that has been really strong with me for a while, that's just it energizes me. I can feel those futures, and I swear to God, it's like they are just pulling me through, and it's I feel so held by that. And it's been really interesting because I felt a real loss of that over this last week, on and off in different ways. Um, and it's also felt like a return at the same time. So I could feel that I wasn't being just dumped on by the collective. That really wasn't what was happening. Even though I could tell that I was being definitely, what do I want to say, like pulled around in those collective currents. I mean, that's what it felt like. And yet at the same time, I knew the reason why I was being pulled into those currents was because of my personal need to come in. So I'm not feeling like I'm able to give this much understanding right now. But my sense is that there is more of that kind of energy in some ways that we're going to be asked to work with, based on what I'm looking at with this degree in Scorpio. And it's important to recognize that that is not always a bad thing to be pulled under. I think it's often, I mean, I know I often am like, what is wrong when that happens to me? And it's interesting when just through all of the work and talking that I think we do, contextualizing things, it feels like more and more it doesn't hook me in the same way, where I'm like, oh, something's got to be really, really screwed up here because I just am not feeling this or that. Instead, it was really like, oh, what is happening here? Like, I really don't have the energy that I normally do. Something something is calling me in, and that inward space, and being able to actually hone into that definitely felt like it was that a base level, like in my song of life, this is actually all there all the time. But when that future's calling me forward, then I have this forward momentum that sort of pulls things and works with things at a certain vibration. And yet underneath that, this is all here. And right now, the currents are pulling me down into those spaces. And can I allow myself? Can I give myself permission to let that be okay? And to really find a way to take care on the surface in the ways that I need to take care, while also granting space for whatever the natural process is that's happening, that's really wanting to open up into more realms of understanding rather than the ones that I'm normally living by. So let me just read this. I want to pull this in because I think it's going to summarize it much better than I did. So this is from the Star Sparks, and this is Scorpio 24, which is coca bushes growing wild in the Andes Mountains. We begin to center upon an undivided world that contains every wonder and mystery, and that can work within absolutely any layer or level of existence with equanimity and true acceptance of whatever that domain requires. Now, we have taken our wanderlust and transmuted it into one keen inner direction right through the heart of the world. Once we narrow it down to the most wide open, yet decisively all here path, Spirit can guide us freely into any and every space we are meant to traverse. At last, there are no compulsions, no addictions, no fanaticisms. We treat the entire panorama of existence as calling to the center, breath by breath. So this is, there's a lot of wild threads to this degree too, and it was making me think of some of what got shared in our Venus circle a week or so back, when someone was really sharing about the wild woman archetype. So I also just want to invoke that wild woman archetype, because the description of how we kind of get to this space that I just sort of described through Elias's words is really by letting that wild woman archetype, or man archetype, but the wild one in us, have more space and more freedom to traverse and adventure through all of the spaces that are not always welcoming or not always safe to traverse within our normal identifications. And therefore it requires breaking free of those identifications and letting it all go in order to actually get more into what skills and capacities we actually have to traverse things and the wonder of life with much more freedom. And I was even going to screen share this one, but I'm not able to call her up, so I'm just gonna have to let that one go. But I do think that sometimes the wild woman from the surface perspective, and how that archetype maneuvers, has to be translated for each of us in our own right into what that wild woman on the inner terrain needs to do in order to open those spaces and go into doors and find different tools to unlock places that she or he's never been before. And so that's one of the invocations I really want to invite folks into with this upcoming new moon, is to really contemplate what is the wild one on the inside need in order to expand the capacity of aliveness from the inside, so that this piece here that's being being conjured by Elias, of really being able to narrow it down to the most wide open yet decisively all here path. Spirit can guide us freely into any and every space we are meant to traverse. So I definitely feel like, there's some real crystallization here of that, the combination of the focused energy and presence, coming in a potent way.
Yeah, Marcella, I'm in this space. I'm starting to um, activate new senses, a new way of being with the earth and being in relationship with the world and with myself. And it's really cool because it's so different from my usual way of thinking about things. It's more an immersion in life and being present that is, it's really nourishing.
Mm. Do you want to give us like one example, Lily, if you can, of one of those immersions, just to spark the sensory systems for all of us?
Yes. Okay. So over the weekend, I was called by one of my classmates in the chart study group to look into the asteroids. And the asteroids, I know this is off subject, but it's about this immersion. I think everyone who's read Elias's take on the asteroids has questioned it and been like, it's just what like, is that all? Is there more? Like, I keep looking for other chapters. Like, is there something somewhere more about these asteroids than just that they're deceptive and the critical mind, and they're really, anyway. So I went into it and I really felt this sense that they are these twisted remnants of this exploded planet, and yet they still um, contain within them, the ones that we study are the goddess, the divine feminine. And so yes, they've been ripped apart in our culture, and yes, they've been pushed to the side, and I've thought a lot in class about, well, maybe I just won't even look at them. And there was one that I had read the Star Spark for, and I just kind of skimmed over it because it was just an asteroid. And I remember reading it, but I didn't take it in. And I read it yesterday, and it was about this new sensing, this new sensibility of being able to like sense into the asteroids, be able to feel what they're about and what they're trying to say to us and how they need to be heard. And these goddesses need to be reawakened within us in their, and understood that they have been disfigured and they have been lost and forgotten and diminished, and that we need to recognize all of that in order to through these fragments find our wholeness again. So that's an example of the kind of sensing that's coming through me. Like, I can turn my focus to anything and absorb it.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. I'm hearing too just the that whatever the topic might be, right? So in this case, the topic is around the asteroids, but what I'm hearing and what you're saying is that regardless of all the conceptual stuff, it's opening up the connection that you have to what feels true and real and necessary and important for your development to understand at this time in a way that serves. And that I just want to illustrate that as part of this example of the decisively narrow coming with the all present and the all here. It's like, this is where the Maya have always inspired me so much, because in council space, you start to see how the multidimensional sensory experience can be held without the mental constructs that create divisiveness or polarity around it. Because someone else might have a completely different conjuring of what they believe the things that Lily is saying to mean, but it doesn't matter because Lily's presence is mixing with these pieces to bring forward a sense of truth and wholeness for her in her path. And when I just believe there's something about our capacity through language to allow it to be so much more meaningful than we often let it be in a certain way. Like it's because it's all we have. It's like, it's just, and there's so many other ways to communicate. I know I say that almost every time we gather, but I'm just feeling that as an example here, with what you're talking about, Lily. And when you feel into what is being expressed, it's that, it's funny, the word that was coming was legitimization, kind of a thing, but that doesn't feel like the right word. But I think when you think about something being legitimate from the inner experience, it's like that sense of knowing, or that sense of truth, or that sense of deepening in one's understanding. And anyway, thank
That
you.
rings like a bell.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Mary, did you want to weave something in?
Yeah. I wanted to thank Lily and Carolyn's her response to Lily's email about the asteroids, because it just opened me up so much. Today I watched a 3-hour program about the goddesses, or about goddesses from ancient times through now. And it's just so exciting to start getting really involved in femininity, the feminine movement, this feminine women's spiritual movement. Well, however that's going to look, I don't know, but thank you so much. It was beautiful information.
Well, thank you, Mary. Yeah, it does. I can feel the rush of the space too, of just that acknowledgement. Like there's so much being acknowledged in that conversation. So thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to weave in about your experience, Mary, or this upcoming new moon?
No, not right now. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. Is anyone else wanting to pick up a thread? And I see your hand, Sarah.
I've been noticing one thing about the whole collective thing is the degree to which I need to just wring myself out. Like that I have such a tendency to be a sponge. And, it's not like I don't have good boundaries, because I do. But it's I don't know, it's just kind of my nature, I think, to just be energetically perceptive. And that means taking it, I have to take it in to perceive it to a certain degree. A lot of times I can perceive things like over there with the other person. But it's been just there's been so much. So I've just noticed that I really have to like pull the energy through and like wring it out like a washcloth, like because it's too much, and it's just too much, which is useful. But the other thing I've been noticing, and I've been doing this for a long time, but I actually noticed that I do this, which is I'm always asking questions of everything I'm seeing. Like when I'm out in nature, like that thing that Lily was talking about, that's deep sensory. I do that all the time because I'm always asking questions. Like I look at the clouds and I go, wow, that's beautiful. Do you have something you're wanting to say? Or is there something you want to tell me? And so like it makes it allows like a fully engaged kind of ongoing conversation with the everything, which I totally love to live that way. And it's like my favorite way to do it. And it just allows for such an expanded awareness, because everything is alive and everything is connected and everything is talking to each other all the time. It's just a matter of like tuning into the conversation almost. And I just love it. It makes everything very alive. Just feel it's like really being with the aliveness in everything. And it really helps me.
Yeah, that's so cool. And what a great way also. How it translates to me too, Sarah, is by your asking questions to the clouds or being receptive to a communication or a feedback loop with nature in that way. When you take that art and you also allow that to happen on the inside, in a sense, it creates its equal and opposite on the inside, which is equally powerful and also another way to be able to break open layers of experience and understanding. So just that practice on the outside feels like it's generating something really profound on the inside simultaneously.
Yeah, I do that with my body too. Because I really feel like my body it's like the foundation of the wisdom that is me, and knows all my experience and knows all my the obstacles that I've generated and the dramas and everything else. So yeah, totally, the body is the inner thing for sure.
Yeah, and I just, for some reason, I don't know, it's just like there's something about the way nature works that can be such great metaphors for the way we work, that when all of a sudden the energy that I might be feeling on the inside, I can relate to it like a cloud or a mist or a river or a tree or any of those things. It helps me to develop those relationships to energetics as well in a way that's unique and different. So I'm just digging the way that I just love that practice. I think it's really beautiful, and I think there's a lot of that I'm taking right now as to how I can apply that also to this deeper inner work in a way that would keep me more engaged. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Is there anything else that anyone wants to weave in? And if not, I'll keep going. But I just want to make sure while we're at this rest stop that is that you, Carolyn? Are you coming out?
Yes, I'm here. I'm kind of in the dark tonight here. Started my day at 3:30 in the morning, and that was something I was going to weave in is, really resonating with everyone's shares, especially, I think, Sarah, exactly what you said. I'm not as conscious of my body as holding that ability to kind of be my, place to go within for my truth, but I'm learning it quickly. But what I was going to say about the feminine kind of asteroid energy and this wholeness is there does seem to be something pretty powerful happening this week, in that Venus in her sign of Libra, and at the very end of it is opposing Mars in his sign. And at the same time, I think the dragon tails are also kind of almost like a grand cross. And I know some people have been talking about this, but I think in terms of the new moon coming, it's almost like there is this ability to go backwards and forwards to kind of feel the true essence of, like, feminine and even masculine. And I feel like there's something with this new moon that's going to kind of alchemize there, because karmically, I think it's being reset, and maybe reset in a new way. But I feel like there is something. And then the moon is on Friday the 13th, which is traditionally very much a very feminine day. So So I know I've been really impacted by it, but with the collective energy as it is such, I feel like we have to go find those parts of ourselves. And that's something that I really have been, kind of pondering on, is even though there's this reset point, it has to start in us first, and that wholeness and kind of, even awareness. And then I feel like it's going to ripple out, but it's pretty intense. It's a bunch of, especially when you do go out into what the external energy is like right now. It's like Sarah said, bring it out, but I feel like you can almost like, it just triggers a lot of different, almost like trauma responses in me, I feel like. So I really, even places that I've considered safe places. And so I think more and more that siren call to go within is just really strong. And then there is like these energies waiting to kind of help us with that task.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for that insight, Carolyn, too, about just how you're seeing the Venus opposing Mars piece of things too, and excavating those parts of ourselves within that interplay of the sort of back and forth, and the push pull maybe a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny too, as you were talking about that, it just also brings up, because of the way that we work with soul level astrology and star genesis, that pull, and some of the interpretations that you can look at has a lot to do with how we advance and mature in relationship. So there was actually a lot of eclipses that have happened in this Aries Libra pole, in this opposition over the last century. I don't have all of the dates. I'm not really good at memorizing all that kind of technical stuff. And one of the themes that was associated with that, has a lot to do with how we want to move beyond relationship that happens where one person benefits at the cost of the other, and advance that whole sort of paradigm so that actually things move into this resonance of mutually beneficial relating, which is, definitely different than this sort of teeter-totter version. And I do feel like this whole Capricornian journey with all of these, outer planets in that sign, is really kind of helping us to also get even more collective structures that are moving kind of in that same resonance. So I do think that's just a really great thing to point out, Carolyn, and a great lens for us to also work with some of these inner energies on as well in this new moon, is really looking at whether that theme of looking at relationships from, have I found ways to hold a context that's not just, one person benefiting at the cost of the other, but also just plainly and simply, how am I maturing in my capacity to have more fulfilling relationship, period? How am I advancing myself around fulfillment in relationship? Because there is so much, we're all having relationships all the time in different ways. And our most intimate relationships can definitely test us in ways that other relationships don't. But all relationships are teaching us so much about who we are and how we generate and create in the world. And as we move more into advanced relationship, there's a few themes around this new moon setup that touch on this, which is why I used Carolyn's share as a kind of jumping off point. But it does come down to inquiring sometimes, what is the purpose of this relationship, and how is it propelling things forward in a way that really fulfills me and fulfills a higher purpose. So it's not around growing beyond personal fulfillment in relationship, because that can all be a part of it as well, but it's how can we how are we being grown by our awareness and our consciousness of how our relationships are serving something greater than ourselves and serving something greater than even the relationship itself, and being able to learn from that and grow from that, so that our capacity for real, cooperation, collaboration, creation, is all getting a real sort of upliftment, a real skill enhancement, kind of a real future moving activation in some ways. I think you can look at it through masculine and feminine. There's lots of ways that you can kind of break those dualities up to learn from, but I also just want to set that tone of how are we advancing and how are we looking at relationship as serving something greater. Because those themes are definitely in here as well.
That means a lot to me, what you were saying there about, the relationship thing, because to me, it's something about being able to see it impersonally, like not to take personally, what is happening, because I feel like I'm in a tumble dryer at the moment, and it's, I was having a boundary issue with my neighbors who, abused my boundary, and I was having to, and, I'm a bit of an Amazon. I'm quite fierce, and I hold my boundaries, and I expressed it. And even though, my anger, and even though I might have not expressed it as well as I would have liked, I needed to back myself. And that was really good. I mean, what we're doing here helps such a lot if you can love yourself, even though fierceness doesn't look pretty sometimes, And then I've gradually seen that it's all, because I just stood my ground, it's all kind of rolled out as it needed to roll out. And it's been good that I did hold my ground. But there's that kind of masculine feminine thing, because I've seemed to have, it was hard for me, because I've always been down on myself about being a bit too fierce sometimes, or a bit angry, or about holding boundaries too strongly, or whatever it may be. And so my nervous system has gone out of I've put my whole right side of my rib cage into spasm. My right leg is on, I don't know, it's like not functioning as well as it should. I'm not sleeping at night, and it's sort of, there's something like it's as if I'm thinking I have to hold, a position, but actually it feels like I'm needing to let go into something being right, like that can flow, the feminine part of that can just, let that flow and let that be right and keep it in balance. Whereas I've probably gone, too much out on my masculine side in order to hold a boundary as strong as that. It's all a bit of a tumble for me right now, but it feels like these masculine feminine energies and the not taking it personally, that helps it flow, and seeing that my fierceness was a necessary piece of the puzzle right then. I have that piece. And, if I'm courageous and brave enough to contribute it, it actually does make a contribution, that there was something that needed sorting out and wasn't going to be sorted out, by the other people that don't have that piece. So it's been really interesting to me to see it, played out in front of me like that.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much, Fiona. I was struck when you this might be just like a language difference, but you said I needed to back myself. And when you said that I needed to back myself, is that like you needed to be there for yourself? You needed to represent yourself? Is that what that means to you?
Yeah, because I've always shamed myself about how fierce I can be.
Uh-huh. You felt ashamed by how fierce you could be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you had to come into alignment with that part of your nature that showed up in a way that you didn't feel good about, but yet you also felt it was necessary.
Yeah. And it's part of, I've shamed myself because I've been socialized into being a really tame Leo, you know,
Yeah.
I'm actually quite a fierce, you know, I can be quite fierce, but I've been tamed. I've been well tamed.
Yeah.
And so it's one that is very easily shamed.
Yeah.
And instead of shaming myself, I just breathe, you know, through it. But it seems to have gone right the way through my body in a way that I'm now having to, you know, resolve and deal with, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And you seem to be describing that as like the tension of how you hold that, like that there might be more of a tension that causes harm for you and how you hold that energy,
Yes.
rather than like a more feminine holding, which just lets the wild be, lets the fierce be. Like
Yes.
we have a new cat, and so I'm watching this. Literally watching cat fights happen in my house on a regular basis, which I've never really witnessed before, and it's really fascinating, right? Because the one mama cat who's older, the little kitten doesn't really understand how it's bugging her so much. It just wants to play and be with her, and she's like, like just totally having to defend her space. And right after that, man, that little kitten is like, right, hey, I want to play still, and she's like trying to get. But you know, it's been really powerful for me to witness that, because I feel like that on the inside, but like you know. It's hard for me to be okay with that part of me and how it takes care of me. And, you know, not that we can't always have choice at how but if we never have contact with that energy and let it free, then how are we going to ever find ways to be with it, or have any tool around or resource around how to work with it? So, what a great example of the wild energy that's wanting to break us open into new relationship in ways that can allow this mutually beneficial thing to happen, because sometimes someone needs that fierceness, right? Yeah. Who are we to judge what someone else needs? I'm not saying that as a way to be, but I do think it's a good question to ask, that sometimes we think that we are taking care of everybody else by being certain ways, when sometimes actually what people need more than anything is our raw truth done with presence and love. And that can be the most powerful relational dynamic sometimes for things to move in an exceptionally beneficial way. And not always, but sometimes it really is. And how hard we work to protect everyone from sometimes things that really serve the whole.
And it sounds like too, Fiona, that if you would have kept mum, you would have stewed inside and held this energy and resisted that fierceness. And the resistance is just so draining, like Marcella was just, you know, illustrating there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just went with it. I had to do it and say it, and that, you know, but it's been interesting, you know, the consequences in my body, because I think I'm needing to resolve it and be in relationship with that part of me in a whole different way than I have before. Like it needs to be acceptable to my whole nervous system, and, you know, to not just, you know, in the moment. And yeah.
It seems like that may be what's restructuring in your body and your experience is the way that had crystallized, the training and the being nice and the not necessarily inhabiting your fierceness. You know, that may be what's breaking up in your body. God only knows.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm leaving myself open to that, which is really, which is good. Very uncomfortable, but, you know, I think that is the possibility, and it's lovely to have that context to hold it in, you know.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your first-hand experience with some of what we're talking about. That's really, really, really powerful. And, you know, there's a piece of this 24 Capricorn, which is where Pluto and Jupiter is going to be conjunct coming up here. That's on Thursday. I don't have the date, on the 12th. And one of the pieces from that degree that stood out to me and this degree definitely has much more collective connotations to it, which I just found to be so interesting, where the new moon definitely felt like it had very much that personal inward tone to it. This other piece of astrology happening Thursday definitely has some stronger collective themes to it, and one of them was just how wild it is to exist in times when so much is being metamorphosed and so much is being changed, and that there is a wildness to that happening, and that deep truths come out through our flaws, and that that's really part of the design, and that it's really important that we have the capacity to love ourselves and others deeply enough that we can navigate these times together with a greater understanding that this is big stuff, and there's a lot of ancient history that's coming with this, and there's a lot of emphasis on we have fucked this up before, and I think this might be the way to do it this time, and that way that you're doing it, that fucked it up last time. Like, there's actual, like, it's like legendary charge from past lives and other collective lifetimes where we've been at this juncture. And so it does feel important on the personal that we're really able to give ourselves a lot of loving kindness and a lot of acceptance and a lot of self-understanding that we are imperfect beings, and we have a tremendous amount of wisdom and truth simultaneously, and so do other people. And we don't carry the answer solely inside of us as one individual unit. There are other truths, and it's okay for us to be really clear about ours without having to influence or make everyone else validate that for us, rather than aligning with that with such truth and accepting openness that others can also have their truths, and we don't know, even though it might look like a real twist and a real screwed upness on the outside, we may not know what that actually is on the inside for that person. And so our capacity to really be open to understanding and creating understanding and know how much charge we're actually bringing into this moment is one way to help us be able to navigate all the changes and how radical they are, and even how much we're growing, so that something that seemed really, really clear and really, really true last month might be the biggest distortion we've ever run into this month. So how are we going to hold that? And what kinds of practices are going to let us traverse that territory with love in our hearts, and know that underneath all of this, things and actions that are done with that commitment to love and understanding, regardless of how fierce we might need to be, or regardless of how we wanted and needed to show up in order to actually get that part of ourselves in some wholly new way that we couldn't get by holding back, that we can keep returning to the love and keep returning to the forgiveness and keep returning to the awareness, really, that is being offered to us, so that we just have the sustainability of navigating in ways that are growthful and also enriching, and not that it means that every relationship is something we have to cling to in any way, but it is something that we can grow from. And even as we move on, or we move past, or we let go of relating in certain ways or to certain people, we can do that clean and clear without wondering, or without questioning how quick this growth process is, and how there is a process of letting go and opening, and letting go and opening within ourselves, and also within each other and in our relations. Yeah, definitely seems when I look at this 24 Capricorn, it definitely, it just definitely invokes a lot of charge, is the sense that I got from that one. And our need to be able to carry that with a new kind of, just a new kind of holding in some ways. I am going to weave in Venus too, but before I do, I just want to stop there to see if there's any other comments on this piece here. I see you, Leslie.
Can I weave a piece in here? The women who run with the wolves.
Nice. I've been thinking about that ever since we invoked the wild one.
Yes, and especially with what Fiona shared and what you shared earlier, Marcella, about feeling like you're being pulled down a little bit. And this quote, somebody posted it, I think last year somewhere, and I ended up rereading the whole book again because it spoke to me so much, but it's still this one paragraph that sticks out nonstop for me. And it goes, the deepest work is usually the darkest. A brave woman, a wisening woman will develop the poorest psychic land. For if she builds only on the best land of her psyche, she will have for a view the least of what she is. So do not be afraid to investigate the worst. It only guarantees increase of soul power through fresh insights and opportunities for revisioning one's life and self anew. It is in the psychic kind of land development that wild woman shines. She is not afraid of the darkest dark. In fact, she can see in the dark.
Mm.
And I love that. And because I too, Fiona, there's been lots of times that, especially this past year, where stuff is coming up from the dark and my body's going through all of these readjustment periods. But I keep saying to myself, that's just stuff that I stuffed in the dark. It's been in the basement for a long time. It's coming up now, and now my nervous system is learning how to rebalance. And I just have to, this image comes to me over and over and over again.
Mm.
The yin-yang tree. And every time I feel like I'm being pulled down and I get freaked out, it's like, no, you're just growing your roots right now. Just stay with it. You're growing your roots so your branches can go up higher. And that helps to calm me when my body is going like out of whack.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for reading that passage too. And that was really, it definitely hits the spot of, yeah. Yep, just, yeah. Good landscapes. A good landscape analogy. Well, so also on Thursday, so I'll just weave in this last piece of Venus. We have Venus conjunct the moon again, and so we are moving from the heart chakra down into the solar plexus in terms of that Inanna story that we've been traversing on that front. And that is also happening in Libra, as Carolyn had pointed out in her share. So it's, it's interesting for me because I just feel like I'm on this whole track of underneath justice is love, and justice without love degenerates into something else. And so I just keep feeling that part of the the power and our own resource, our own love resource is such an important thing to stay aligned with, especially during these times. So that's also happening on Thursday. So big astrology. And then I will say too that the full moon will be a lunar eclipse during this cycle. So you might want to note that, and then that will lead into the solar eclipse that will happen on our next call. Basically, for our next new moon will be a solar eclipse. So we're just kind of heading into this final astrology of this year with those eclipses too that will connect in with the winter solstice. So I think it's going to be a wild one. I'm hoping that the external tensions maintain a low rumble while we're actually pulled into more of this inner terrain in good ways. So I really invite you all to keep looking at how to break through the barriers that we've built on the inside, the layers between us and ourselves, the layers we have between parts of ourselves that don't like to talk to each other or don't have a lot of room for each other. I just think there's a lot of openings that we can help to facilitate during this lunar cycle. And I'm really appreciating all these examples that you all have woven in of different ways you're working with the astrology and the sensory system and the receptivity system and the fierce feminine system, because all these things are just a part of our nature, and it's so important that we keep developing and finding our own way to express that in unique ways. And then here, I really appreciate the collective voice that keeps us and encourages us to keep doing the work. So, are there any final shares or comments before we sign off tonight?
I would just weave in, and Leslie kind of triggered it in me, the reminder. I had mentioned I got up very early because I've been doing this flower essence group around the world, actually in Australia, where we're going through the different elements. And we took air today, and I've been having a really visceral experience with each of these flower essences. And I actually felt like I got like connected to the divine today, and it was in the darkness, and it was very peaceful, and it was very calm, and it was just so black, like there was no light whatsoever, but it was such a very peaceful place to be when I was doing the meditation. And then what I did see is that that yin yang sign, like I literally saw that, like the light and the dark just like really harmoniously together. And I feel like with Venus moving to the solar plexus and us talking about like where have we held our power back, or where have we changed our truth for, you know, to kind of play the line of who we should be versus who we really are. And you know, with her transiting at this time, it just feels really potent that this is going to be this burst into like power and balance, because there's a balance that comes when you acknowledge your truth. I think you actually get to a really peaceful, calm place in a way. And so I just hope we all can do that, and it does move out to the collective, because I think it's up for us. Like we have to kind of do our best individually and collectively, because it's pretty critical. It's like everything's at a boiling point, really.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carolyn. I have a song actually. I hope it's gonna hit the spot, but it just came, so I'll give Lily a break tonight. All right. I don't know if this one was written by Lainey, or I'm not sure where the origins of this one was or is. All right, let's see if I can find it here. Deep into the earth I go, deep into the earth I know, deep into the earth I go, deep into the earth I know. Hold my hand, sisters, hold my hand. Hold my hand, brothers, hold my hand. Deep into the earth I go, deep into the earth I know, deep into the earth I go, deep into the earth I know. Hold my hand, sisters, hold my hand. Hold my hand, brothers, hold my hand. Sing with me. Deep into the earth we go, deep into the earth we know, deep into the earth we go, deep into the earth we know. Hold my hand, sisters, hold my hand. Hold my hand, brothers, hold my hand. Well, may you all enjoy being you. May you all love what it means to be you. May you all fully experience what it is to be you, since you are the only one that can do that. So I really love you all. Thank you so much for coming together. And I'll see some of you soon, I'm sure, and I'll see some of you later. So take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.